It began with a sound, not the one everyone was waiting for, but the one no one expected. A reporter's voice, cut short, a sharp command, "Get out!" And then, the unmistakable image of an elderly woman, her hands trembling, holding a firearm on the porch of the Lamont family property. For weeks, there had been silence from the family of little Gus Lamont, the 4-year-old who vanished without a trace from a remote South Australian sheep station. But in that moment, the silence was broken, not by words of grief or pleas for help, but by confrontation. The footage spread quickly, reigniting the case and the question that has haunted every investigation since. What is really happening behind those closed gates? And why is Grandma Josie so determined to keep people away? This is Shadow Detective, and today, we look deeper into the strange and unsettling turn in the Gus Lamont disappearance, and what this confrontation might reveal about what's still hidden on that property. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Shadow Detective, and share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what do you think Grandma Josie's reaction really means? Because sometimes, the loudest clue comes from those who refuse to speak. The disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont shook South Australia in a way few cases have. On a quiet afternoon, Gus was reportedly playing near a sand heap just outside the family's homestead, a remote property near Yunta in the state's arid mid-north. According to police, he was last seen wearing a blue t-shirt and shorts. There were no screams, no signs of a struggle, just gone. Within hours, local police, state emergency services, and volunteers began searching the area. Helicopters scanned the barren terrain. Drones swept through paddocks. Thermal imaging, scent dogs, and dozens of searchers combed through the dry scrubland that stretches endlessly into the horizon. But as the hours turned into days, and then into weeks, nothing emerged. The property belonged to the Lamont family, longtime residents of the region, known locally for their livestock work and quiet, private lifestyle. Gus lived there with his parents, his baby brother, and his grandmother. Josie Lamont, the matriarch of the household. In a community where everyone knows everyone, their silence quickly became noticeable. While neighbors and volunteers continued the search, the Lamonts themselves remained mostly out of sight. No media interviews, no public pleas, no visible emotion, just quiet detachment. That silence became louder as weeks passed. Then came the breaking point. The moment cameras rolled and Josie Lamont appeared on her porch, gun in hand, warning reporters to leave. For many following the case, it was more than a dramatic headline. It was the first unfiltered glimpse into a family dynamic that had remained entirely off limits. But before analyzing Josie's confrontation, it's important to understand how the investigation reached this point, and how every decision, every search, and every silence contributed to the growing unease surrounding the Lamont case. From the very beginning, police treated the case as a missing child investigation, not a crime scene. That distinction, subtle as it may seem, would shape everything that followed. In those crucial first hours, search crews focused outward, covering a radius of nearly 6 kilometers around the Lamont homestead. They looked for footprints, clothing, any trace that a child might have wandered off. Drones were flown repeatedly over the property, mapping terrain that was open, flat, and largely unobstructed. If Gus had simply walked away, logic suggests something, anything, would have been found. But nothing was. No shoe prints, no scent trail, no items of clothing. It was as if the child had vanished into thin air. Then came the first significant theory, that Gus had wandered toward a nearby dam, roughly 600 meters from the house. A search team drained the entire body of water, more than 3 million liters, revealing only mud, debris, and silence. Still no Gus. It was a devastating setback. Authorities didn't give up. Forensics returned to the property several times, each time widening their focus. They used heat detection, ground-penetrating radar, and cadaver dogs. They interviewed every known visitor, delivery driver, and station worker who had been on or near the property that week. But something about the family's silence unsettled the public. When investigators asked for detailed statements, responses were reportedly minimal. The parents stayed inside. The grandmother, Josie, became the family's reluctant spokesperson, though her words were few and her actions increasingly defensive. At one point, local reporters were asked to stay clear of the property for safety reasons. But when a camera crew approached the homestead weeks later, what they captured became national news. Josie Lamont, standing on the porch of the family home, brandishing a firearm, shouting at them to leave. It was brief, chaotic, and uncomfortable. Her explanation later was that she'd seen a snake on the veranda and grabbed the gun to kill it. Police, for their part, accepted the account, noting that no shots had been fired. But public reaction was different. To some, it looked like fear. To others, guilt. And to those following the case closely, it felt like a crack in the silence, a glimpse into something deeper, something the family wasn't ready to share. Meanwhile, as the official search wound down, a new question began to take shape. If Gus didn't wander off, then where is he? And why does it feel like every answer leads right back to the homestead? In missing person investigations, silence is often louder than words, and in the Lamont case, it became deafening. For over a month, Gus's parents remained unseen. No public statements, no press conferences, no emotional pleas. Not even a brief thank you to the volunteers who had spent days combing the unforgiving terrain around their home. Instead, the family withdrew completely. To the outside world, Grandma Josie became the single visible figure connected to the Lamont property, a gatekeeper of sorts, both literally and symbolically. Her outburst at the reporter wasn't just a flash of anger. It was a moment heavy with contradiction, defensive, emotional, and profoundly human. The official explanation was simple. She had grabbed the gun to kill a snake. And yet, locals familiar with the region raised valid questions. If snakes were so common, why would a 4-year-old have been allowed to play unattended in such a hazardous environment? If the family's dogs were nearby, as most properties of that scale keep them, why hadn't they sounded the alarm at the sight of a venomous creature? Observers began to notice patterns of contradiction, the kind that investigators quietly marked down in their notebooks. A family terrified of snakes, but not enough to supervise a child outdoors. A grandmother so fearful of danger, she keeps a firearm close, yet more reactive to a camera than to a missing grandchild. A property described as searched top to bottom, yet still off limits to anyone outside the immediate circle. Psychologists who study family behavior in crises often describe two kinds of responses: the open plea and the protective wall. One seeks connection with the outside world, desperate for help. The other closes ranks, driven by fear, shame, or simply mistrust. The Lamont family clearly chose the latter. But why? Some analysts point to cultural and environmental factors, a rural instinct to handle things privately. Others suggest emotional overload, a trauma so deep that speaking publicly feels impossible. Yet there's another layer, one that touches on psychology. When people are caught between truth and perception, they often try to control the narrative. By keeping outsiders away, they also keep questions at bay. And that control, for some, feels safer than closure. Still, that control came at a price. Because with every day of silence, public curiosity turned into suspicion. And when a family under the spotlight refuses to speak, the silence itself becomes evidence. By week 5, the case was no longer just about a missing child. It was about behavior, human reactions, inconsistencies, and the invisible boundaries people build when they have something to protect. But to fully understand the gravity of those reactions, one must look beyond this case, to another eerily similar disappearance that happened not far away. A case that, years later, still casts a long shadow over South Australia. When patterns repeat themselves, investigators are forced to ask whether they're seeing coincidence or something far more systemic. Roughly a decade before Gus Lamont vanished, another South Australian family found themselves at the center of a similarly haunting mystery. A young boy, 6 years old, disappeared while playing near a rural property's edge. The story made national headlines for weeks. Search parties scoured every inch of land and water within kilometers. But the body was never found. At first, the community rallied, but as days passed, cracks began to form. The same kind of cracks that would later echo in the Lamont case. Family members contradicted one another. A relative accused the media of harassment, and when police tried to revisit the property with new technology, access was suddenly restricted due to private reasons. The parallels were striking. Both families isolated themselves. Both cases involved tight-knit rural households, protective of their land and privacy. And both generated a sense of unease, as though something wasn't being said out loud. Behavioral criminologists sometimes call this mirror psychology. When a second case echoes the first, it often helps investigators see hidden layers of motive and emotion in the newer one. Patterns of denial, anger, and secrecy may not prove guilt, but they reveal the pressure points of truth. In the earlier case, the eventual discovery of new evidence, found not far from the property's boundary, reshaped the entire narrative. What was first assumed to be a tragic accident turned out to be something more deliberate, a misdirection, an attempt to hide reality in plain sight. That breakthrough came through persistence and technology. Aerial scans and drone footage captured subtle irregularities in soil texture and thermal readings. At the time, those tools were new and rarely used outside military contexts. But they revealed what traditional search teams had missed, and that's what makes the recent reports surrounding the Lamont property so compelling. Because in both cases, it wasn't an eyewitness or a confession that broke the silence. It was the land itself, when finally observed from above. There's a quiet truth in forensic science. The earth remembers what people try to forget. The more you look at the parallels, the harder it becomes to dismiss the possibility that what happened years ago could, in some way, be repeating itself. Not necessarily in motive, but in the rhythm of concealment. The similarities serve as both a warning and a clue. Because while the earlier case ended with an unexpected discovery, the Lamont case remains frozen, caught between rumor and revelation, until perhaps technology once again does what human cooperation could not. And that brings us to the latest and most talked about development, the drone footage that might finally reveal what's been hidden on the Lamont property all along. By now, the pieces begin to form a quiet but unnerving picture. A missing child, a family that retreats from the world, a grandmother who meets a reporter not with grief, but with a gun, and a story that keeps changing, from snakes to silence. At first glance, these details might seem scattered, disconnected, but patterns, real ones, rarely announce themselves. They whisper through contradictions. They appear in what people choose not to say. Some analysts suggest that what we're witnessing isn't a case of malice, but of control. A family caught between public scrutiny and private guilt, constructing a barrier between themselves and the outside world. When truth threatens identity, denial becomes armor. It's possible that Josie's outburst, the firearm, the fury, wasn't about the reporter at all. It was about the pressure, the weight of a story that no longer fits neatly within its public version. When truth is fragile, curiosity feels like an attack. Others have speculated about the geography of this case, the isolation, the physical vastness of the land. It's the kind of environment where secrecy doesn't just survive, it thrives. When every neighbor is a kilometer away, silence becomes a kind of language. And then there's the matter of the snake story. If that detail was improvised, even in panic, it shows something critical, the instinct to explain before being asked, to narrate the narrative. Because in every investigation, there's the surface version of events and the rehearsed one. But what truly lingers isn't the weapon or the argument or the silence that followed. It's the question of proximity. If the truth of Gus's disappearance lies close, perhaps even on the property, then every act of hostility toward outside eyes begins to make sense. Protecting the land might also mean protecting what lies beneath it. Still, nothing is certain. And that uncertainty is where cases like this either collapse or evolve. Police continue to say they're not ruling anything out. Search efforts expand. And every new piece of evidence, even one as simple as a soil scan or a timestamp, has the potential to reshape everything we think we know. Maybe Grandma Josie isn't concealing a crime. Maybe she's concealing shame or trauma, or the unbearable idea that someone within her family could be responsible. Sometimes the weapon isn't aimed at a person. It's aimed at the truth itself. And in that truth, we find the case's most haunting reflection, that love and fear often look identical when viewed through the lens of secrecy. As investigators, observers, or storytellers, our role isn't to accuse, it's to notice. To watch how stories bend under pressure, to see which details remain consistent and which dissolve the moment someone feels seen. So when Josie raised that gun, maybe it wasn't just a warning to a reporter. Maybe it was a signal to the world. Stay out. You don't know what's buried here. And so, as the sun sets over the dry expanse of South Australia, the silence that surrounds the disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont grows heavier. The land holds its breath, and somewhere within that stillness, truth lingers. The dam has been drained, the search grids widened, the statements logged. But no one can drain the silence. No one can map the distance between what was said and what remains unsaid. In time, memories fade, statements blur, and grief reshapes itself into habit. But the facts, the unchanging, cold, quiet facts, still sit beneath the surface, waiting for someone patient enough to look again. Grandma Josie's anger, the missing boy, the strange coincidences of other disappearances, they form the edges of a picture we can almost see, but not quite. Perhaps it's a story about guilt. Perhaps it's a story about protection. Or perhaps, like so many mysteries, it's about silence itself, the kind that protects, the kind that hides, and the kind that condemns to. As investigators revisit the case, one truth remains. Time doesn't erase evidence. It only buries it deeper, beneath layers of story, memory, and fear. And maybe, just maybe, the real answer has been there all along. Because in every mystery, there comes a moment when the question isn't what happened, but why the truth stayed hidden for so long. Until that question is answered, Gus Lamont's story will remain open, echoing through the quiet of the outback, through the unanswered questions of a family, and through the hearts of everyone still searching for him. Thank you for watching Shadow Detective. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and comment where you're watching from. And tell us what you believe really happened to Gus Lamont. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate. Because maybe the truth didn't disappear that day. Maybe it was buried, waiting for someone patient enough to look again.